Hello everyone, my name is Laura. I love to crochet and we're gonna do something a little bit different in today's video. And I'm going to be recreating a crochet piece that I saw on an influencer. So I think once you start crocheting and knitting, you start seeing it everywhere. I know like the Taylor Swift dress was huge in the crochet community. Anytime you see a crochet piece on someone notable, it's fun to talk about, think about how it was constructed, try and recreate it for yourself. And so I wanted to do some more of that. And I was scrolling on my Instagram and I saw a post by an influencer called Margot Lee. She does a lot of like fashion and lifestyle content, and she was wearing this really cool granny square beanie. And I was like, ooh, gotta recreate that. So I gathered all the materials that I need. I am just going to look at this image and try and recreate it. So I'm not saying that it's going to be an exact replica, but I'm going to try my hardest. And I thought it'd be fun to show you the process, and then if you want to make one for yourself as well, give you the tools and tips and tricks that you need to do that as well. So going to get into it, but if you see any other influencers, celebrities wearing crochet or knit garments that you think would be fun to recreate, feel free to let me know. I would love to try and make those too. Obviously, if it's someone like a small designer, someone that sells their patterns, any of that kind of stuff, I'm not going to go there. But if it's like a fast fashion piece or a designer piece or whatever that is, I'd love to try to recreate it. So let's get into it. Okay, so when I look at Margot's hat, it looks like a granny square beanie. And what I'm seeing is it looks like it's 4 granny squares that make up kind of the main brim of the hat, and then 1 granny square as the top. Usually when I'm making granny square hats, I do a 5-sided granny square as the top and then 5 panels around, just so that it stops it from looking as cubic, but it looks good on her. So we're going to try and be true to the reference and do 4 panels around the perimeter and 1 4-sided granny square at the top. And then when I was looking at the images as well, it looked like the inside of the square was 2 rounds of the same color, and then the 2 outer rounds of the square were each different colors. So to me, and the lighting's a little bit tricky, but it looked like that kind of inner square, those inner 2 rows were like an off-white cream with a little bit of brown in it. Then it was more of like a cream color and then the darker brown on the outside. So that's what I'm working with. And I am using Loops and Threads Soft Classic Acrylic. So for the inside, I'm using this color called Mushroom. It's ever so slightly more gray than I think the one that is in her beanie, but I think it will work. And then for the second furthest round, I am using Loops and Threads Soft Classic Acrylic in Off-White, just kind of your essential off-white color, and I think that will be good. And then lastly, for the outside, I am using Loops and Threads Soft Classic Acrylic in the color Dark Chocolate. So really kind of going with those neutrals, finishing it off with the dark chocolate color. I was also thinking about using this brown instead, which is coffee, but I think it's just a little bit too light. It would be nice if I had a brown in between these 2 browns, but I don't. So we're gonna go with the darker brown, and I think that will be fine. And so like I said, it's going to be the first 2 rounds of the granny square in the mushroom color, the 3rd round in off-white, and the 4th round will be in that dark chocolate color. So then what I did was measure around the circumference of my head to figure out how big my granny squares need to be. So the measurement around my head is 22 inches. I believe that's the standard women's head size, but measure your head, see what it comes out to. And then I took that number and divided it by 4 because there's 4 panels in the beanie. So 22 divided by 4 is 5.5. And so I'm going to try to get my granny squares to be about 5.5 inches in width. Because it is a beanie, it's okay if there's stretch. This acrylic yarn has some stretch to it. So if the squares are a little bit smaller, that's actually better. Because you'll get a tighter fit on the beanie like hers is. So I'm gonna aim for somewhere between 5.25 and 5.5, just so that there's a little bit of room for stretch as well. And I'm going to show you now how I made the granny squares. If you already know how to make a granny square and you're good to move on, I'll make sure that there's a timestamp or a chapter so that you know where to move on to. But if you need a little bit more information about how to make a granny square, I will show you now how I made these ones. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I made the granny squares for the beanie. And I started with the inner color, which is the mushroom color. And I'm going to start with a magic circle. If you haven't made a magic circle before, I'm going to link a tutorial down below so that you can check it out. But once you have your magic circle, magic ring, I'm going to chain 3, and that will act as our first double crochet. And then I'm going to do 2 more double crochet into the loop. So now you have a cluster of 3 double crochet. Then I'm going to yarn over and chain 1, yarn over and double crochet another cluster of 3 double crochets. So that's the first one, this is the second one, and the third one. So you have another cluster of 3. I'm going to chain 1, another cluster of 3 double crochets, so double crochet number 1, 2, and 3, chain 1, and we are going to do 1 more cluster of 3 double crochets. So in total, we are going to have 12 double crochets in our magic loop. So that's my 12 double crochets. Then I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to tighten up my magic circle like that. And I'm going to take my hook and find the third chain of that chain 3 that we started with. So 1, 2, 3. I'm going to insert my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through both loops to create a slip stitch. And that is the first round of our granny square. Now, because we're using the same color for the first 2 rounds, I'm not going to fasten off my yarn. I'm going to keep it attached, and I'm going to start with another chain of 3 to act as our first double crochet. Then I'm going to create 2 more double crochets, and I'm going to put those, so if you'll see here, we have our cluster of 3 that we started with and the cluster of 3 that we ended with, and there's that space that was created by our chain of 1 in between. So I'm going to move backwards, essentially, take my yarn and my hook, and I'm going to insert it into this space, yarn over and create my double crochet, and I'm going to do 1 more in that same space that was created by the chain 1. So yarn over, find that space, insert your hook, and do another double crochet just like that. Then I'm going to chain 1 and insert another double crochet into the chain 1 space that was created on this side. So you'll see that space here, yarn over, insert your hook into the space, and create your double crochet. I'm going to do 2 more into that same space. And then I'm going to chain 2, because this is going to be a corner of our square. I'm going to go back into the same space that we just did those 3 double crochets in, and I'm going to add another 3 double crochets. So that's 1, 2, 3. You see how that creates the point of the corner. Now I'm going to chain 1, because this is not a corner, and I'm going to double crochet into our next chain 1 space between the clusters. So I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into that space, do 3 double crochets, chain 2, And then I'm going to do another 3 double crochets into the same space, creating another corner. So that's 1, 2, and 3. And now you have 2 corners. Then I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to insert my hook into the space between the next cluster of 3. And we're just repeating what we've already done. So you're going to put your 3 double crochets here, a chain 2 in between, and another 3 double crochets in the same space. 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to chain 1, and now we're back at the space that we started with, and as you'll see, we only have 3 double crochets here where all of our other corners have 6, so it's time to complete this corner. So into that space where we've put those 3 double crochets at the start, I'm going to insert my hook and do 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, and a 3rd double crochet. And then I'm going to chain 2 like we've done for all of the other corners. And then for this corner, I'm going to find the 3rd chain of the chain 3 that we started with. I'm going to insert my hook, and I'm going to slip stitch together. So now we have a square with 4 corners. And now we're going to switch to a new color. So I'm going to chain 2, pull up my yarn a little bit, leave enough of a tail there. I'm going to take my scissors and just snip. And then I just push down on that chain and it creates a nice secure knot. So now we're going to move on to our second color, which is the off-white color. And I'm going to create a slip knot. And I'm going to insert my hook into the loop and just pull that tight like that. Then I'm going to take my granny square and I'm going to insert my hook into one of the corner spaces. It doesn't really matter which one. Usually I just do the opposite side of wherever I fastened off on the previous round. So I'm going to insert my hook into the space, not into a chain, but into the space. Then I am going to slip stitch to join my new color. And I just like to tighten up that knot on the slip stitch a little bit when I do that. Then I'm going to start with a chain of 3 like we've been doing all along, and then add 2 more double crochets into the corner, forming our first cluster of double crochets. And this is similar to what we've done in the previous round, but with this round, it's not all corners like we've done before. There are spaces between the corners. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to chain 1. I'm going to do 3 double crochets into this space here. So this is the corner, this is the flat side, and it's going into this space here. So 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, and 3 double crochets. Now I'm not going to chain 2 and put another cluster of double crochets in here because this is the side and not a corner. I'm just going to chain 1. And now we've reached our corner. So this is where we want to do what we were doing in the previous round and do a cluster of 3 double crochets, a chain of 2 in between, and another cluster of 3 double crochets in the exact same space, just like that. Nice corner. So again, now we're going into the side of the square and not a corner. So I'm just going to chain 1 and put 3 double crochets into that side space. Chain 1, And now we're at another corner, so we are going to do a cluster of 3 double crochets, chain 2 in between, another cluster of 3 double crochets into the same space, like that. And I'm just going to repeat that pattern all the way around until I get back to our lonely corner over here. Okay, so I've come back around to the corner where we started. I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to put another cluster of 3 double crochets into the same space where we started. 3, and then I'm going to chain 2 and slip stitch into the 3rd chain that we started with at the start, just like that. And so now you can see our granny square has gotten larger, and it still has its 4 corners. And we're just doing 1 round of that off-white color, so I'm going to stop here. I'm going to do what we did before and just fasten off our yarn, just like that. And I'm going to move on to our final color. Okay, and our final color is the dark chocolate color, so I'm going to attach my yarn in the same way I did with the off-white, just creating that slip stitch. And I'm going to insert my hook into any corner space and slip stitch to join my new color. Then I'm going to start with a chain of 3 and do 2 more double crochets into that space. Then I'm going to chain 1, and now we are working in the side of our granny square again, so I'm going to do 1 cluster of 3 double crochets into this space here. Chain 1, and then I'm going to do another cluster of 3 double crochets into this space. So 1, 2, 3, chain 1, and now we are at a corner, so we're going to make our corner here, yarn over, insert into the corner, and do our 3 double crochets, chain 2, and do another 3 double crochets into the same space. So 1, 2, 3, like that. And then we're going to repeat this all the way around. So doing 2 single clusters in each of the side spaces and a corner in each of the corners all the way back around, and I will meet you when we are back at where we started. Okay, and I'm back to where we started, where we have our lonely cluster of 3 right now. I'm going to chain 1, yarn over, insert my hook into the space, the same space as our lonely cluster here. Add 3 double crochets, so that's 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm going to chain 2, slip stitch into the top chain of the chain 3 that we started with, and then I'm going to chain 2, pull up a loop, and fasten off. And that is our finished granny square. So for the hat, we are going to need to create 5 of these in total, 4 for the perimeter of the hat and 1 for the top. So I will see you when I have all of those granny squares done. Okay, so I've made my 5 granny squares, and like I was talking about, I did the 2 rows of the mushroom color, 1 row of the off-white color, and 1 row of the dark chocolate color. So I have 5 of these now, and I'm going to lay them out in the pattern of the beanie, and then I'm going to use a slip stitch to seam them together. So I'll show you how I'm going to do that, and then we should have the basic shape of the beanie. Okay, so this is how I have the squares laid out. This one in the middle is going to be the top of the beanie, and then each of these coming off is going to be the side. Right now I have the right sides facing me, so the finished sides. What I want to do is flip them over so that the wrong sides are facing me. And then I'm going to go in and slip stitch them together. So I'm going to start with slip stitching them around this center one, around the top, and then I'm going to do each of the sides. So I will show you how I do that. I'm going to take the chocolate brown yarn, the same one that I used to make the border, and I'm going to make a slip knot, insert my hook, and then I'm going to take my first 2 granny squares, so that middle square, and then I'm going with this one that's closest to me. And you're going to kind of create a little sandwich like this, so that the wrong sides are on the outside and your 2 right sides are sandwiched in the middle together. Then I'm going to take my hook and insert it into the second chain. It's so hard to see with this yarn, but the second chain of the chain 2 that we created to make the corner. So I'm going to insert my hook there and into that same, so the second chain in my second granny square as well. And I'm going to slip stitch that to join. Then you're just going to go into the same stitch on each granny square and slip them together. So I'm going into the loop that's facing me. So this front loop of my first double crochet here, so I'm going in there, and then the same on this one, I'm going through the farthest loop at the back of the first double crochet of that chain of 3, but then I'm just going to slip stitch into each adjoining stitch all the way around the granny square. You can sew your squares together as well if that is your preference, but I like using the slip stitch because it keeps the project nice and stretchy, which for a beanie I think is nice to have as much stretch as possible. Okay, so I finished my first side of slip stitch. So again, this is our middle square and our side square here. And now I'm going to add our next square. So I'm going to keep my yarn attached. I'm going to make our little sandwich. So putting the good sides sandwiched inside together and the wrong sides facing out like that. And then I'm just going to keep working in the same way. So going into that second chain of the chain 2 to make the corner, doing that on both sides and slip stitching them together, and then going through the corresponding stitch on each side. And I know it's really hard to see with how dark this yarn is, so I will also make sure to link a tutorial down below that goes into more specific detail about how to slip stitch if you have not done it before. So now I have my middle square and my 2 perimeter squares seamed together. And I'm just going to do the same thing for my final 2 squares, and I will meet you when I'm done with that. Okay, so I've slip stitched all of my granny squares to the top of the hat, and now I'm going to join them along the sides. So I'm going to just fold it together make sure that the wrong sides are facing up, and I'm going to just work a slip stitch in the same way all the way down this panel. Okay, and I've made it down to the bottom of the panel, and I'm just going to fasten off my yarn. And I'm going to do the same thing all the way around the hat, so joining all of these panels together, and that's going to give us more of our beanie shape. So I will see you when I've done that. Okay, so I just finished seaming up the beanie, and I thought that I would try it on and just see how it's fitting, how it's looking. I love the fit. I think it's fitting just right, and I really like the way that it's coming together. I wasn't sure about the 4 squares, like if it was gonna look really like cubey or something, but it doesn't at all. I think it fits really, really nicely. I also really like the color. I wasn't sure. Usually I'm more of like a colorful person than a neutrals person, but I really, really like how it came together. So next step is to add the little border that hers has. It looks like a double crochet border, and then just weave in the ends. Clearly I have not done that yet, but we're getting close, and I'm really happy with how it looks. Okay, so the hat is all seamed together, and the last step is to add a border. So in the original image here, you can see there's a bit of a border around the outside. It looks like half double crochet, I would guess, because it looks shorter than the double crochets, but not short enough to be a single crochet. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to attach the yarn and do half double crochets, and then just looking at it again, I wonder if there is a single crochet border around the outside. It doesn't really look like there is, but maybe let's do the half double crochets and see if it looks like we need to add a single crochet around the outside just to clean it up. So to create that border, I'm just going to take my yarn, create a slip knot, and I'm going to be working on the right side of my work, and I'm just going to add this somewhere inconspicuous. I usually like to do it around like a join or a corner, so I'm just going to insert my hook, slip stitch, and then we're working half double crochets, so I'm going to start with a chain of 2, and then I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into chain below, yarn over, and pull through all 3. So I'm going to continue working those half double crochets all the way around, and I'm just going into each stitch along the edge. Okay, our beanie recreation is finished, and I really like the way that it came out. I think it looks really similar to the one that Margot is wearing in the image, which is great. And it was really fun to use that inspiration to push me outside of my crochet comfort zone. So like I had said, I've never done a beanie using only 4 panels. Usually I do 5, so it was fun to try that out and see what it looks like. And usually I also wouldn't really work in this color palette. Usually I'm more colorful than neutral, but it was fun to try out a new palette and some new colors. And I do actually think because this beanie is so neutral, it'll go really well with all of my winter jackets, which is nice. Good to have a practical hat sometimes and not one that's like 45 different colors. So really happy with that. And I do like the chocolate brown. I think it looks nice. But yeah, like I said at the beginning, if you have an influencer that you follow or a celebrity that you see wearing a crochet or knit garment, feel free to send it my way and maybe I will recreate it. I'll put my Instagram on the screen if you want to DM me, and I'll take a look at those. But I'll be keeping my eyes peeled for interesting recreations and things to make. So keep an eye out, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.